story takes place in a busy town filled with many adventurers walking around. Among them is a 30-year-old man named Reda Dixon. 5 years ago, when he was 25, he moved to the royal capital because he deeply admired the lifestyle of adventurers. He became a member of a C-rank adventurer team called the Jet Black Wolves. Now, 5 years later, he is the only member of the team who still remains at the very lowest F rank because he is quite weak in combat. As Reda walks through the town, he notices a little girl sitting on the ground crying because her knee is hurt. Another child sees her and calls her weak as usual, while a third child suggests that they should just leave her behind. Reda notices the children and walks over to them. He politely asks the little girl if he can look at her knee. Still crying, the girl asks the older man why he cares. Reda then uses his magic to heal her. The girl is completely shocked and happily announces that all her pain is gone. Reda gently tells the girl to keep his healing power a secret, and she joyfully agrees. She waves to him and loudly thanks him as he walks away. Reda possesses a unique personal skill called Heal, and he also has a rare ability called an item box. Feeling a bit thirsty, he gets a drink. While he is drinking, he wonders why Jill, the leader of the Jet Black Wolves, suddenly called him to meet at the local tavern. Reda wonders if the meeting is about how they can finally raise their team from C rank to a B rank. When Reda arrives at the tavern, Jill acts polite at first, but then darkly tells Reda that he needs to leave the team. Reda is completely confused by this sudden news. Jill drops his friendly act and admits he was only acting nice to copy Reda's style. He bluntly states that Reda is fired. Reda stands up and asks Jill why this is happening so suddenly. Jill explains that it is not sudden at all, pointing out that their team is finally about to rank up from C to B. Reda mentions that he already heard about the rank up, but he does not understand what that has to do with him leaving. Jill explains that Reda has only ever been useful as a replacement for healing potions and as a person to carry their heavy luggage. Jill states that he does not want Reda holding them down any longer. Reda tries to argue, stating that he still provides a lot of help to the team. This makes Jill very angry, and he slams his drinking cup hard onto the table. Jill furiously shouts that the rest of the team members have been working desperately toward this goal since they were 10 years old. He says that an older man who only started adventuring in his mid-20s and has failed to rank up at all should just disappear quietly. Jill then calmly demands that Reda leave behind all the gear and items that the team had stored inside his personal item box. Reda tries to object, but Jill cuts him off, stating that they cannot afford to give away any equipment now that they are challenging the next rank. Reda argues that without any equipment, he will no longer be able to do any work as an adventurer. Jill just smirks and tells Reda that he is not cut out for the job anyway, suggesting that he should return to the countryside to plow fields. Reda becomes completely silent and tightly clenches his fist. He lets out a very long sigh. He tells Jill that he understands and accepts that this is their final farewell. Jill responds with a cruel insult, calling Reda a useless person, and loudly celebrates that their B rank is now guaranteed while sarcastically thanking him. Reda walks away in silence. Suddenly, a woman named Rincer, who is Reda's lover, spots him and calls out to him. She quickly learns that Reda has quit being an adventurer. She immediately realizes that this means his source of income is completely gone. When Reda confirms this, Rincer goes silent. She then coldly tells him that she no longer has any use for him and that they are breaking up. Reda is shocked and asks her what she is talking about. Rincer calls him a very dim-witted person and explains that since he has no more money, there is no longer any benefit in dating him. Reda is highly confused and asks about all the things he has done for her in the past. Rincer scoffs and asks if he's talking about the money. She claims that because she allowed him to date a beautiful woman like her, it was only natural for him to give her money. Reda reminds her that he only gave her that money because she told him her parents were deeply in debt, and he truly just wanted to help her family out of trouble. Rincer chuckled and mocked Reda for actually believing her story about her family, admitting that she had not seen her parents' faces in many years. When Reda, shocked by this revelation, asked if she had lied to him and demanded to know why, she stepped closer to him and coldly explained that she did it purely to get his money. As she turned to walk away, she mentioned that she had to go because she had a date to attend. Reda desperately asked who her date was with, and Rincer replied that she was meeting a magnificent adventurer with a lot of money, someone who was completely unlike him. Reda tried to stop her from leaving, but she told him goodbye and warned him never to speak to her again. Reda could only mutter her name in sadness as she walked away into the darkness. He was left standing all by himself in the night, completely brokenhearted and weighed down by deep sorrow. The next morning, Reda was still fast asleep in his bed while empty beer bottles lay scattered all over the floor. Upon waking up and realizing that daylight had already arrived, he sat up on the edge of his bed and rubbed his aching head. He remembered that he had turned to alcohol the previous night to cope with his pain, and the painful memories of everything that had happened flooded back into his mind. He let out an awkward laugh, realizing with surprise that he was still capable of laughing despite his miserable situation. To snap himself out of his sadness, Reda slapped his own face and determinedly decided that he would refresh himself first before heading out to look for a brand new job that very day. Later, Reda arrived at the capital headquarters of the Adventurers Guild, quietly hoping that he would be able to find some kind of work to do. Suddenly, a guild staff member named Syra called out to him, apologizing for keeping him waiting. Reda flinched in surprise when he turned around and recognized her. Syra immediately requested that he follow her to the back room so she could hear all about his current situation. Reda hesitated and tried to point out that he would lose his place in the line, but Syra firmly insisted that he follow her anyway. Once they were in private, Syra expressed absolute disbelief and anger over how boldly and rudely Jill had treated him. When Reda looked at her in confusion, Syra made it clear that Jill was completely wrong and foolish. She revealed that the guild had actually offered the rank-up promotion to the entire group, which absolutely included Reda as well. As a staff member at the capital headquarters, Syra explained to a confused Reda that even though his official adventurer rank was very low, his unique item box ability and his special heal magic made him incredibly valuable. Reda doubted her words, arguing that his healing magic could easily be replaced by common potions and that his item box was only useful for carrying heavy luggage. Syra let out a very deep sigh of frustration. She explained that she now understood what had happened, realizing that Reda's old party members had intentionally filled his head with those negative, irresponsible thoughts just so they could keep exploiting him and using his skills. She strongly emphasized that both his healing magic and his item box were actually extremely rare gifts. Furthermore, she told Reda that if his old party, the Jet Black Wolves, had not constantly caused so many problems, Reda's own rank would have risen significantly higher a long time ago. Reda awkwardly dismissed her compliments, calling the idea silly, which only caused Syra to shout at him in deep frustration because he failed to see his own true worth. Trying to calm her down, Reda steered the conversation back to his main goal, reminding her that he had come to the guild that day specifically to look for new employment. Syra blushed and apologized for losing her temper. She then showed him the current job openings, noting that there were also several adventurer parties actively searching for a healer to join them. While looking through the papers, a headline about immigrant recruitment caught Reda's eye. When he questioned her about it, Syra apologized and explained that it was a notice for moving to a new place that had accidentally gotten mixed into the pile. Reda read the paper and looked at the name of the town, Amurus. Thinking about all the terrible things that had just happened to him in the capital city, he realized it might be wonderful to start over completely in a brand new location. With sudden excitement, Reda declared that he wanted to go to the town of Amurus, leaving Syra completely shocked by his sudden decision. Later that night, under a calm and peaceful sky, Reda sat completely alone next to a warm campfire. As he took a slow sip from his cup, he quietly noted to himself that even though spring was approaching, the nighttime air was still quite cold. He calculated that he still had 3 days of traveling left before he would reach the town of Amurus. He smiled as he remembered how hard Syra had tried to stop him from leaving at first, but in the end, she had kindly sent him off with her best wishes. He warmly recalled the moment she handed him a special letter of introduction, explaining that she had a very good friend working at the Adventurers Guild in Amurus who would help him when he arrived. Reda thought about how Syra was such a wonderful person for handing him a letter of introduction for the local guild. On top of that, she had even arranged for him to travel half of the way on a merchant's carriage. Reda reached into his item box, deciding to treat himself that day by cooking a nice, thick slice of meat. He noted that even while traveling on the road like this, raw meat did not spoil at all inside the item box, making the ability much more useful than he had originally thought. He also pulled out oil, milk, root vegetables, salt, pepper, and some bread, deciding that these items would be enough for his meal. As Reda was cooking the meat in his pan, a sudden stomach growl echoed through the quiet night. Reda flinched in surprise and realized that the sound had not come from him. He immediately grabbed his knife and called out into the darkness, asking if someone was there and telling them to please come out. The person remained quiet at first, but then slowly stepped out from hiding. Reda looked at her in surprise, seeing a young girl with blank eyes and torn clothing standing quietly before him. Reda put his knife away, muttering to himself that it was a girl, and noticed how completely worn out she appeared to be. Reda gently asked the girl if there was anyone else traveling with her, such as her father or her mother. The girl simply shook her head in response. This made Reda think worriedly to himself, realizing that there must be a deeper reason for a young girl to be entirely alone in a place like this. He then asked her if she was hungry and invited her to come over so they could eat a meal together. When the girl did not answer, Reda spoke to her in an awkward but kind voice, encouraging her to come closer because it was cold where she was standing. He added that he was an old man who had been very lonely all by himself, so he would be incredibly happy if she joined him for dinner. At that moment, the girl's stomach growled again, prompting her to slowly walk over toward him. She began to eat the food very hungrily, which made Reda think about how truly starving she must have been. When her stomach let out yet another rumble, Reda kindly told her that it was perfectly fine and urged her to eat some of the meat as well, reassuring her that he still had plenty of food left. The girl stared up at him with a look of absolute awe. After a while, they finished eating their meal, and the girl politely thanked him for the food. Reda warmly told her she was very welcome. He then suggested that since they had already shared a meal, they should introduce themselves, explaining that his name was Reda Dixon and that he was an adventurer of sorts. The girl simply replied that her name was Mina. Reda asked Mina if she had any idea where her home was or if there was another place where she could go, but Mina shook her head, which made Reda look very worried. He then asked her if she would like to come along with him for the time being, explaining that he was on his way to a town called Amurus and would be stopping by a smaller town near their current location along the way. Mina hesitantly asked if that was really all right, and Reda confirmed that it was. He then noted that her feet must be hurting quite a bit and offered to treat them, asking for her permission to touch them. Mina pointed out that he did not have any medicine, but Reda explained that he did not actually need any. He quietly mumbled a spell to soothe the girl's wounds, and all of a sudden, Mina's injuries healed completely, leaving her totally surprised. She exclaimed in amazement that the pain was entirely gone and began to thank him, though she hesitated over what she should call him. Reda smiled and told her that just calling him Reda was perfectly fine. With tears in her eyes, Mina happily agreed and thanked Reda. Afterward, he had Mina drink some warm honey tea to keep her body from catching a chill, and the two of them slept soundly together inside the small tent until the morning broke. The sound of rolling wheels echoed through the quiet forest as Reda Dixon and Mina sat together in silence on a moving cart. Suddenly breaking the quiet, Mina spoke up and expressed how incredibly glad she was to have met such a kind person like Reda. Reda smiled warmly at her and agreed with her words. Soon after, the elderly driver called out to them, announcing that their destination was finally in sight and pointing toward the town of Morelia. Once the cart came to a stop and they safely arrived, Reda expressed his deep gratitude to the old man for the ride. The driver kindly brushed off the thanks, stating that he had only helped them because he genuinely wanted to do so. Shortly after entering the remote town, another elderly man greeted them and curiously questioned what kind of business a father and daughter could possibly have in such a faraway place. Reda politely introduced himself by his name and introduced the young girl as Mina, who then offered a quiet greeting of her own. The old man softly chuckled at her manners, commenting on what a sweet little lady she was, and introduced himself as Roji Morelia, the mayor of the small town. Reda shook the mayor's hand and explained that they would be staying under his care for just a few days. As they spoke, Mayor Roji took a closer look at Mina's appearance and asked if she had been walking straight through mud puddles. He advised Reda that, before doing anything else, he should take the girl to wash her body in the local inn's bathhouse. The mayor then gave them directions, explaining that if they walked straight ahead from that spot, they would find a shop. He noted that a kind lady managed the inn while an elderly grandmother ran the nearby store, suggesting they head there afterward to purchase some proper clothes and shoes. Reda thanked the mayor for his immense kindness, prompting the old man to chuckle. The mayor reassured them that even though his town did not have many grand attractions, the local townspeople were incredibly nice and the food was absolutely delicious, so they should just relax and enjoy their stay. Reda and Mina then walked over to the Sparrow's Wings Inn, and a ringing doorbell signaled their arrival as they stepped inside. A welcoming woman greeted them happily and named the establishment. Reda spoke up, explaining that he would like to rent a room to stay for the night. The innkeeper glanced down at Mina's messy state and immediately insisted that the young girl's very first priority should be to go and take a proper bath. The woman quickly rushed over to a cabinet, opened it up, and informed them that they would be staying in room 201 on the second floor. She mentioned that the price would be 2 silver coins, which fully included their meals, and pointed out that the bathhouse was located just to the left. Before they could leave, the helpful woman suddenly tossed a pair of boots over to Reda and told him to take them for Mina. She pointed out that the young girl obviously could not go out shopping completely barefoot, and explained that she would take the boots back later, so they should go ahead and do their shopping right after the bath. Reda thanked her deeply for her thoughtfulness, and the woman gave him a friendly wink, telling him not to worry about it at all. Mina, feeling a bit shy, also spoke up to thank the kind woman. Reda then told Mina that they would head over to the bath first, and Mina agreed. However, a sudden thought crossed Reda's mind, causing him to ask Mina if she was actually capable of taking a bath all by herself. Mina flinched at the question and shyly replied that she was not a little kid anymore. Inside the women's bathhouse, Mina carefully took off her tattered clothing and placed them neatly inside a basket. She opened the bathroom door, stepped inside, and gasped in absolute surprise, whispering to herself that it had been an incredibly long time since she had experienced a proper bath. Mina began her washing routine by lathering shampoo thoroughly into her hair and scrubbing her body clean. After splashing fresh water over herself to rinse off, she gently touched the warm water inside the large tub to test the temperature before stepping completely inside. As she relaxed and got lost in a daze while soaking in the warm water, Mina softly murmured the words "father" and "daughter" to herself in a very quiet and confused voice. After finishing her long bath, Mina returned to Reda and worriedly apologized, asking him if he had been waiting for her for a very long time. Reda reassured her that it was perfectly fine and explained that, more than anything, they needed to head out immediately to buy her some new clothes and shoes. Hearing this, the innkeeper gave them an encouraging thumbs up and urged them to go on ahead and pick out some truly cute clothes for the girl, which left Mina looking quite confused. Reda simply waved goodbye to the innkeeper, confirming that they were off, and the two walked out together. A welcoming voice greeted them the moment they stepped inside the clothing shop. Reda announced himself and explained to the shopkeeper that he was looking to buy some new clothes and shoes for the young girl. The elderly woman running the shop smiled and referred to them as a father and daughter team of adventurers, gesturing for Mina to come closer to her. However, upon taking a closer look, the old woman gasped in complete surprise and demanded to know why Mina's clothing looked so completely shabby and worn out, asking if she did not possess any spare outfits at all. Reda awkwardly scratched his head and sheepishly replied that it was a complicated situation like that. The elderly shopkeeper told him to wait for just a moment while she searched her inventory for something that would fit the young girl properly. When she returned, she presented a lovely one-piece dress made of high-quality fabric that was perfect for a short journey, along with a pair of shoes. She called out to Mina and asked her to step into the dressing room to try the new clothes on, and Mina complied. While the young girl was away changing, the old woman turned back to Reda and gently asked if there was a specific reason behind the child's poor condition. Reda answered honestly, explaining that he had traveled to this remote town specifically to see if there was anyone Mina knew living here, but his explanation trailed off. The elderly shopkeeper told Reda that it was unfortunate, but she had never seen the young girl before in her life. She explained that because Morelia was such a small town, all of the residents lived close together and knew one another well. Reda quietly wondered if that was really the case. Just then, Mina peeked out through the dressing room curtain and softly called Reda's name before stepping out completely. She stood there anxiously, nervously fidgeting with her fingers while she waited for Reda to say something about her new appearance. The old woman gave Reda a quick shrug, signaling him that he needed to give the girl an answer. Reda looked at her and told Mina that she looked incredibly cute. Privately, Reda thought to himself that while he already knew she was a cute child, he had not expected her to look quite this wonderful in the new dress. The shopkeeper then suggested that they should choose some other outfits for her as well. When Mina looked surprised by the idea, the old woman reminded her that since she was traveling, a single set of clothes would certainly not be enough. Reda gently patted Mina on her head and reassured her that they would purchase whichever clothes she liked the most. Mina began to search through the hanging items on the rack, eventually pulling one out and shyly asking if it looked good. The old woman asked if she was absolutely sure she liked that specific one, or if she wanted to keep looking at the other options. Mina turned back to the rack and continued her search. After a short moment, she tried on another outfit and stepped out, quietly asking Reda how it looked on her. Reda warmly assured her that it really suited her perfectly. Mina blushed deeply at the compliment and found herself completely unable to speak a full word. Reda smiled and encouraged her to keep going, asking her to show them even more choices. After a while, the old woman happily thanked them for their business and kindly offered to give them one set of clothes for free as a special service. Reda thanked her deeply for her generosity, and they finally exited the store. Once outside, Reda told Mina that he could easily store her new clothes inside his magical item box, but Mina shook her head to decline. She nervously called out Reda's name, smiled warmly, and thanked him for buying her the new clothes, promising that she would treasure them forever. Reda welcomed her and suggested that they return to the inn to eat their dinner. Back at the inn, Reda and Mina sat down and thanked whatever powers there were for the food before starting their meal. Mina expressed absolute awe at the food, noting how incredibly tasty the demon pig steak was. Reda agreed with her, mentioning that the meat seemed to be a special local product of the area, and adding that it was his very first time tasting it. The innkeeper woman chimed in, explaining that the dish was indeed their signature food, and that the demon pigs raised in their town were the absolute best, though she noted that there had been some trouble happening around the area lately. Suddenly, a great deal of noise broke out from the street, prompting Reda to ask what was going on since it was getting very loud outside. The innkeeper woman turned toward the unexpected commotion and announced that she was going to go outside for a short while to investigate. Reda peeked out through the door to see what was happening and flinched back in complete shock when he realized that there were many injured people arriving. An old man in the crowd shouted for others to bring healing potions from the storage area, while another man called out that he had brought a light. Reda looked around at the scene in utter confusion, wondering how there could possibly be such a large number of hurt individuals. Mina asked in deep worry about what could have possibly happened. One of the injured men cried out in severe pain, while the old man urged another patient to hang on tightly, offering him some herbal painkillers to ease his suffering. A voice in the crowd suddenly shouted in pure shock that some of the people had suffered fatal injuries. Hearing this, Reda immediately stepped forward and announced to the crowd that he was an adventurer who could use healing magic, offering to help treat the wounded. The innkeeper woman noticed his offer, while Mina watched everything unfold in complete surprise. Reda firmly told Mina that she needed to stay safely inside the inn, but Mina refused to listen, insisting that she wanted to come along and help him. Reda then shouted that they needed to start treating the most critically and fatally injured people first, and the innkeeper woman quickly pointed him toward the correct location. An old woman at the scene shook her head in despair and told Reda that the specific man before them would surely die without the advanced healing of a priest, pointing out that his stomach had been completely torn open. Reda asserted that he would give it a try regardless, and he immediately began casting his healing magic on the dying man. Mina approached the group carrying bandages and herbs, asking what had caused such terrible harm to them. The old woman thanked Mina for the supplies and explained that a pack of wolves had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and attacked their town's livestock. The badly injured man let out a weak chuckle and explained that they had ended up in this terrible state when they went out to hunt the wild animals down. He weakly told Reda that he would be fine and urged him to go help the other victims instead. Reda shouted firmly at the man, noting that since he was awake, he needed to stop talking and save his strength. Reda looked at the severe injury with deep worry, realizing that the wound was not closing up properly and wishing that he had taken the time to learn advanced healing magic in the past. However, he refused to give up and shouted determinedly that if casting the spell once was not enough to save the man, he would simply use his magic over and over again as many times as it took. Reda repeatedly cast his healing spell on the open wound without stopping. Very slowly, under the continuous flow of his magic, the deep and fatal wound finally began to close up and heal. The previously dying man reacted with absolute surprise, realizing that his pain was completely gone. He tore away his bandage and shouted in utter shock to everyone around that he was fully healed. The old woman watched this happen and declared it completely unbelievable, wondering aloud if this traveler could actually use healing magic equal to a high-ranking priest. The healed man expressed his deep gratitude to Reda. However, Reda humbly brushed off the praise, explaining that it was merely beginner-level healing magic, while silently casting a cleaning spell called Wind Wash in his mind to tidy himself up. He then loudly announced that they should move on to the next fatally injured person. One of the village men responded by pointing out that there were 4 more critical patients waiting for help. With tears welling up in her eyes, the old woman realized that this miraculous power could even save her own son. Mina cheered Reda on, wishing him the absolute best, and Reda confidently told her to leave everything to him. Sweating profusely from the intense effort, Reda eventually announced that he had reached the very last patient. He silently cast his healing spell once more within his mind. The final injured man happily shook his fully healed arms in complete astonishment before bowing deeply to Reda and thanking him for saving his life. Reda wiped the sweat from his brow and let out a long sigh of relief. Suddenly, a voice called out his name, and the entire crowd of townspeople bowed down to him in respect. Mayor Roji Morelia spoke for the community, stating that they could simply never thank him enough for saving the lives of their people. Reda quickly urged them all to raise their heads, insisting that he had only done what he was supposed to do as a decent person. Mayor Roji apologized for causing him so much trouble and explained that they wanted to give him 500 silver coins to compensate him for his incredibly hard work. Reda immediately tried to turn down the money, arguing that it was far too much since he was only used to acting as a cheap substitute for healing potions. Mayor Roji strongly told Reda to stop joking around, pointing out that treating and saving this many severely injured people would normally cost at least 2,000 silver coins. Reda gasped in complete surprise at the massive amount. The old woman curiously asked if he was secretly a priest or a professional healer, wondering how he could possibly be so ignorant about standard medical treatment fees. Reda awkwardly scratched his head and sheepishly explained that since most ordinary wounds eventually heal on their own over time, he had never really paid much attention to those kinds of costs. The innkeeper woman looked at him with deep awe and explained that only a very tiny handful of people in the world could actually use true healing magic, noting that even a small scratch usually required a huge amount of expensive potion to fix. Mayor Roji added to this, wondering aloud just how much money a greedy temple priest would have demanded to save a dying person's life. The old woman further explained to Reda that even if his magic was just basic healing as he claimed, wealthy nobles would desperately want to hire someone with his skills. Reda was left completely confused by their words, but it suddenly made him think back to what Syra had told him at the Capital Guild regarding his true value as an adventurer. Hoping to find a compromise, Reda suggested that they could just consider his current accommodation at the inn as full payment for his services. Mayor Roji shook his head immediately, stating that a single night's stay was nowhere near enough to match the value of what he had done. Mina suddenly spoke up with a clever idea, suggesting that the town could instead provide them with free housing whenever they chose to visit the area again in the future. Mayor Roji thought this was an excellent plan and proposed that from that day forward, whenever Reda and Mina came to Morelia, their lodging would be completely free of charge. Mina smiled happily at the generous offer and asked Reda if he was glad about the arrangement. Reda gave her an awkward smile and told the mayor that the deal would serve perfectly as his payment. He then changed the subject, curiously asking if the local men were still planning to head out into the wilderness to hunt down the dangerous demon wolves. Mayor Roji confirmed that they absolutely had to go through with the hunt, explaining that if they did nothing, their valuable livestock would continue to be slaughtered, and the wild monsters might eventually invade the town itself to attack the citizens. Reda immediately offered to join their hunting party. Mayor Roji asked in surprise if he was truly okay with putting himself in danger like that. Reda turned to Mina and explained that since they were currently traveling to the town of Amurus, he did not want them to get ambushed by a pack of monsters when it was just the two of them alone on the road. He told the mayor that while he might not be the strongest fighter, he did know a few offensive magic spells, so he felt confident that he would not hold the group back during the battle. Mayor Roji enthusiastically reassured him that there was absolutely no way he would be a burden, pointing out that simply having a real healer on the team would allow all the men to fight with complete peace of mind. Reda smiled warmly and stated that he would be in their care, and Mayor Roji happily said the exact same thing back to him. Later that evening back at the inn, Reda let out a comfortable sigh and remarked on how completely refreshed he felt after getting cleaned up. He turned to Mina and kindly told her that she had done an amazing job helping out with the wounded townspeople earlier. Mina thanked him for the praise, and then she suddenly smiled, blushed softly, and told Reda that he had looked incredibly cool while saving everyone. Reda blushed deeply with intense embarrassment at her sweet words, sheepishly thanking her before announcing that it was time to turn off the lights for the night. Mina agreed, and Reda shut off the illumination, wishing her good night. Mina warmly wished him a good night in return, and they both went to sleep. When a morning light finally broke, the local men gathered together outside to prepare for the mission. Reda walked out and loudly wished everyone a good morning. The men enthusiastically greeted him back, and one of them eagerly told Reda to start giving them their tactical orders for the day. Reda confidently accepted the leadership role and announced that it was time for them to go hunt some demon wolves, prompting the men to shout out a loud cry of agreement. The dangerous demon wolves completely surrounded the travel wagons in the quiet forest. In response, the local men raised their weapons and quickly moved into defensive positions around the vehicles. One of the fierce wolves glared intensely at the group. During the initial chaos, a woman named Feifa suffered a severe injury to her right leg. A man named Dick noticed her injury in complete surprise and cursed the fact that such dangerous monsters were roaming so close to their town. Dick quickly ordered everyone to protect their employer and the valuable wagon as Feifa cried out in intense pain. Another man shouted in frustration that the wolf's fur was far too tough for standard arrows to penetrate. Dick grew incredibly worried about their survival and asked Feifa if she had enough strength left to cast magic. Feifa confirmed that she could keep going despite her pain. Feifa focused her mind and silently chanted a spell to summon the spirit of fire to burn their enemies. She unleashed a fiery ball of magic that struck one of the wolves directly. However, the attack only caused a small burn and left the creatures first smoking. Realizing that a single spell would not be enough to defeat the beast, she quickly prepared to cast the magic a second time. Suddenly, Dick flinched in surprise as a wolf dashed right past him. The monster lunged directly toward Feifa with its massive jaws wide open, causing the terrified woman to scream in fear as tears welled up in her eyes. Before the wolf could bite her, Reda suddenly charged forward and slammed his body into the creature, successfully knocking it far away from Feifa. The beast crashed heavily onto the ground. Seizing the perfect opportunity, another man aimed his weapon and successfully stabbed the fallen monster with his sword. The rest of the men rallied together, shouting encouragement to follow the lead of Reda and Commander Riggs. Commander Riggs loudly called for his men to attack, and the fighters enthusiastically agreed. Reda quickly advised the commander to be cautious, pointing out that even though his magic could heal physical wounds, it could not instantly restore a person's lost blood or physical stamina, so everyone needed to avoid being reckless. Reda then rushed over to Feifa to check on her condition, suspecting that her bones were badly broken. Feifa looked up at him questioningly, sweating profusely from the intense agony. She cried out in pain when Reda touched her injured leg, but he quickly and silently cast his heal magic within his mind. While working, Reda asked the group if they were professional adventurers. An elderly man named Eric suddenly recognized Commander Riggs and called out to him. Commander Riggs turned in surprise, and Eric explained that his group was currently acting as an escort for a traveling merchant who had come all the way from the royal capital. Within moments, Reda finished his work, and Feifa's deep leg injury completely vanished. Feifa shouted in absolute amazement that she was fully cured. Dick turned to Reda and asked if they had come to rescue them. Reda quickly used his magic to heal Dick's injuries as well, explaining that the townspeople had actually ventured out into the forest specifically to hunt down the pack of demon wolves. Eric thanked Reda deeply and asked about the cost of the medical treatment. Reda immediately cut him off, kindly stating that his services were completely free of charge. Feeling completely re-energized, Dick thanked Reda and announced that he and Feifa would take charge of defending the left side of the merchant carriage, leaving the right side to be protected by the townspeople. The entire group let out a loud shout and launched a fierce, coordinated attack against the remaining monsters. Commander Riggs directed his fighters to systematically surround the wolves one by one to eliminate them safely. The commander then sat down briefly next to Reda, noting that at this steady pace, they would likely be able to completely defeat the entire pack. As they spoke, Reda silently focused his mind and cast a healing spell on the commander's own injured leg. Suddenly, Reda's expression changed, and he warned the men to stop and wait. The fighters flinched in surprise as they realized a new danger was approaching. A truly massive demon wolf slowly stepped out and appeared right before them, leaving the entire group frozen in absolute terror. Reda questioned what kind of monster they were facing, while Commander Riggs exclaimed in shock that the giant beast must be the boss of the entire pack. The giant demon wolf immediately attacked the group, swinging its powerful tail and sending several men flying helplessly through the air. The devastating strike left only Reda and Commander Riggs standing on their feet. The enormous beast turned its fierce gaze directly toward the remaining two men. Commander Riggs nervously pointed out that the monster seemed to be staring right at them, and Reda quietly agreed with his observation. With a loud, terrifying roar, the massive beast leaped forward and charged directly at them. The giant monster ran past the remaining fighters, knocking more people high into the air. Commander Riggs shouted out in fear as the beast closed in, but he bravely declared that even if he could not do much, he would use his body to protect Reda from harm. Reda decided that he also needed to fight back. He closed his eyes and quietly chanted a fire spell within his mind, calling upon the spirit of fire to burn the giant enemy. Suddenly, a large cluster of glowing fireballs materialized in the air, completely surprising the commander. Reda launched the magical projectiles forward, and the fireballs shot rapidly toward the enormous beast, striking it from all sides. The massive wolf was forced to stop completely in its tracks, and Reda noted with relief that they had successfully halted the monster's advance. Reda quickly chanted another powerful spell inside his mind, calling upon a spear of flame to pierce and burn the enemy. Instantly, a sharp spear of fire erupted from the ground directly underneath the massive wolf, stabbing straight through its heavy body. He yelled out the name of his magic, Fire Lance, as even more fiery spears materialized and repeatedly struck the giant beast. Just as quickly as they had appeared, the flaming lances vanished into thin air, leaving deep, burning holes in the monster's flesh. Blood spurted heavily from the severe wounds, and the massive beast let out one final breath before collapsing to the ground completely lifeless. Once the battle concluded, Reda caused his magical book to fade away. The surrounding men stared at the fallen creature in absolute shock. Feifa questioned what kind of magic they had just witnessed, while Dick expressed amazement, recognizing the spell as a flame lance, but wondering how it could possibly possess such incredible power. The commander approached Reda and praised his amazing magical skills. Reda looked back at him with a questioning expression, prompting the commander to explain that he had never seen anything like that before in his entire life. Reda awkwardly scratched his head and sheepishly noted that even though he was still officially just an F-rank adventurer, he was a mage after all. Suddenly, Dick flinched as he noticed the other monsters moving, loudly warning the group not to get distracted because the remaining wolves were trying to escape. Feifa eagerly agreed, stating that they should hunt down the rest of the pack. Reda immediately offered to lend a hand with the remaining monsters as well, requesting that the others stay behind to guard and take care of the wagon. Meanwhile, back at the village inn, Mina was growing increasingly anxious, expressing her deep worry that Reda had not yet returned from the dangerous hunt. The elderly shopkeeper smiled warmly and reassured the young girl, telling her that her father figure would almost certainly make it back completely safe and sound. Suddenly, the innkeeper woman called out loudly to her mother and to Mina, excitedly announcing that the hunting party had finally returned. Mina flinched in surprise and immediately rushed outside into the street. From a distance, her eyes grew wide as she spotted Reda, who was smiling and talking with the local men. A wave of pure relief washed over Mina, causing her to smile happily. Reda noticed her waiting in the crowd and walked toward her with his arms wide open in a welcoming gesture. Mina ran over and wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug, warmly welcoming him back from the battle. Later that evening, the grateful townspeople hosted a grand celebratory feast to mark the successful defeat of the demon wolves. People danced happily around a massive central campfire. Reda quietly enjoyed the festive atmosphere, thinking about how wonderful it was to celebrate a successful mission and noting to himself that a cold drink tasted incredibly delicious after a hard job. He also felt a deep sense of happiness, seeing that Mina was genuinely enjoying herself at the party. Suddenly, Mayor Roji Morelia called out to Reda, asking him if he was having a good time. Reda warmly confirmed that he was thoroughly enjoying the celebration. The mayor sat down right next to him and brought up the topic of Reda's scheduled departure to the town of Amurus the very next day. Before they could talk further, Eric loudly called out to both the mayor and Reda as he approached them. Mayor Morelia welcomed him warmly, noting that he had arrived at the perfect moment. Eric sheepishly realized that he had forgotten to properly introduce himself earlier, explaining that his name was Eric Latcher and that he represented the Latcher Corporation. Reda politely shared his own full name in return. Eric smiled broadly and expressed his immense gratitude to Reda for his heroic actions during the wolf attack. He explained that thanks to Reda's powerful magic and timely intervention, every single one of his guard had survived and all of his valuable trade merchandise remained completely undamaged. Because of this, he could now travel onward to Amulus without any lingering worries. Reda expressed his genuine happiness at hearing the good news. Eric then mentioned that the mayor had informed him about Reda's plan to travel to Amulus alongside his young companion, whom the merchant assumed was his daughter. Eric kindly offered to let Reda and Mina travel together with his merchant caravan for safety, prompting Reda to curiously ask if it was truly all right for them to join. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to Reda as Mina ran up and excitedly invited him to join her in a dance. Reda hesitated, pointing out that he did not actually know how to dance. However, the innkeeper woman playfully pushed him forward, telling him not to worry about his lack of skill and urging him to just go have fun. Seeing the commotion, Eric bid Reda good night and stated that he would see him the following morning, and Reda politely agreed. Reda turned back to face Mina, who was beaming with a bright smile. He thought to himself about how incredibly long it had been since he last danced. Mina quickly began moving her feet to the musical rhythm, laughing happily as she gently guided Reda through the steps. As they moved together, an awkward memory suddenly flashed through Reda's mind, reminding him of a past time when he had danced with his former lover, Rincer. His shifting mood did not go unnoticed, as a nearby village man jokingly shouted out across the party, asking what was wrong with their new town hero and teasingly pointing out his gloomy facial expression. Reda blushed deeply with intense embarrassment and loudly demanded that the man stop calling him a hero. This sudden outburst caused Mina to burst out laughing, leaving Reda looking down at her in complete confusion. As they continued to dance, serious thoughts began to weigh heavily on Reda's mind, and he secretly questioned whether it was truly a wise decision to bring Mina along on his journey. He remembered that absolutely no one in Morelia had recognized the girl, and his own traveling journey would soon be coming to a permanent end in Amulus. Mina pulled him out of his thoughts by pointing out how incredibly red his face had become. Reda continued to worry internally, realizing that there was absolutely no guarantee they would find anyone who knew her in Amulus either. He thought that if that turned out to be the case, it might have been better for her to stay in this peaceful little town where she had already managed to open her heart to the kind locals. Spurred by these doubts, Reda suddenly called Mina's name to get her full attention. Mina looked up at him questioningly, waiting to hear what he had to say. Reda directly informed her that he would be heading off to the town of Amulus the very next morning. Instead of looking upset or left behind, Mina smiled incredibly widely and enthusiastically stated that she was deeply looking forward to the trip. Reda stood completely stunned for a brief moment, and a look of pure surprise flickered across his face as he stared down at her joyful reaction. A quiet smile tugged at Reda's lips as he looked at Mina. He gently informed her that they would be facing a very busy and difficult journey starting the next day, so it would be best for them to get some rest as soon as the celebration concluded, and Mina happily agreed with the suggestion. When the morning finally arrived, the local townspeople gathered around to see them off. Reda expressed his deep gratitude to Eric for his assistance, to which Eric kindly responded that travelers should always look out for one another. The friendly innkeeper lady approached Mina and handed her a batch of freshly baked cookies that they had made specially for her. The elderly shopkeeper gently patted the young girl's head and reminded her to eat them properly along the way, prompting Mina to thank both of them politely. Commander Riggs warmly invited Reda to visit their town again in the future, while Mayor Roji Morelia chuckled softly and assured Reda that he would always be welcome back in Morelia whenever he pleased. Eric then informed Reda that if he was finished saying his goodbyes, it was time for them to climb aboard the carriage. Reda confirmed he was ready, and the townspeople watched closely as the wagon slowly began to move. The locals loudly shouted Reda's name as they left, calling out for him to come visit them again soon and promising that they would all be waiting for his return. With those final cheers, the wagon rolled out and officially left the small town behind. While riding in the carriage, Dick let out a heavy sigh and admitted that because they had been so completely helpless against the demon wolves on their own, they still had a very long way to go as fighters. Feifa completely agreed with his honest assessment. Dick then questioningly pointed out that despite Reda possessing such incredibly powerful healing magic, it was hard to believe he was truly only an F-rank adventurer. Feifa chimed in to add that his offensive magic was equally astonishing. Dick sheepishly admitted that he and Feifa were also currently stuck at F-rank, but confessed that they highly doubted they would ever even manage to rise up to E-rank. Reda kindly reassured Dick, telling him that because he was still so young, he had plenty of time to succeed. He added that if Dick kept working hard, he could easily reach C-rank or even B-rank someday. This encouragement made Dick smile, and he remarked that he would be incredibly happy if that actually happened. Suddenly, another guard called out to Dick, warning their leader that the road ahead could become dangerous, so they needed to be on high alert. Dick recognized that it was time to get back to work and instructed Feifa to follow him. Feifa agreed, and the two of them hopped out of the wagon to assume their guard duties. With the guards in position, Eric turned to Reda and mentioned that at their current traveling speed, they would easily reach their destination before the evening arrived. Reda questioned this in surprise, noting that he had previously heard the journey to Amurus would take at least 2 full days. Eric explained that a 2-day trip would only happen if they had taken the old route, which required travelers to go all the way around the mountain. He revealed that because a new bridge had recently been built and a direct route had been established, they could now travel straight through, making the entire journey significantly shorter and easier. Reda let out a sigh of wonder and commented on how truly impressive the rapid development of Amurus was. Their journey continued forward in complete peace as Reda and Mina sat together and happily snacked on the cookies she had been gifted. After some time, the wagon suddenly came to a complete halt. Reda turned his head to look outside and spotted a massive structure stretching across the distance, pointing out that they had finally reached a town. Mina curiously inquired if the place before them was indeed Amurus. Reda observed that a massive crowd of laborers was actively working to complete a half-finished outer wall. Eric chimed in to explain that because the city was still very much under active development, there were not many completed buildings yet, but he emphasized that it was an incredibly energetic and lively town. Reda agreed with his observation, thinking aloud that even if he chose not to work as an adventurer anymore, the booming town would offer plenty of alternative jobs for him to pursue. Eric assured them that they would reach the main city gates in just a short moment, and he firmly promised that if Reda ever ran into any kind of trouble in the future, the Latcher Corporation would handle it for him. He explicitly stated his strong desire to fully repay the massive favor Reda had done for them. Reda looked back at the merchant in complete confusion, asking what kind of favor he was talking about. Eric explained that he was referring to Reda's brave actions against the demon wolves, noting that thanks to his help, merchants could now conduct their trade along the road without any constant fear for their safety. Reda responded by expressing his own gratitude, thanking Eric for kindly allowing him and Mina to ride along in his carriage all the way to the town. He added that if Eric ever found himself in a difficult situation, Reda would gladly return the favor and help him out as well. During their conversation, Reda suddenly realized that Mina had been completely silent for quite some time. Looking down, he saw that the young girl had fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep right beside him. Eric burst out laughing at the sight, jokingly suggesting that their serious business talk must have been incredibly boring to a young child. At last, the caravan officially arrived at the city limits. Eric announced that they would now be splitting off to head toward the specific gates designated for incoming merchants. Dick called out a warm goodbye to Reda, expressing his strong hope that they would meet again soon and suggesting they take on an official guild quest together the very next time they crossed paths. Feifa also offered a sweet farewell to the sleeping Mina. Reda expressed his final thanks to the guards for looking after them during the trip and warmly bid the entire group a fond farewell as they parted ways. Reda gently woke Mina up, informing her that it was finally time for them to step inside the town of Amurus. Mina sleepily rubbed her eyes and softly agreed. Reda took Mina firmly by her hand, and together, the two of them walked side by side through the grand entrance to begin their brand new life in the bustling city. In the bustling town of Amurus, Reda and Mina walked side by side down the busy streets, while Reda carefully read the paper that Syra had given him. Before long, their footsteps brought them directly to the Amurus branch of the Adventurers Guild. Upon stepping inside the building, they were greeted warmly by the guild receptionist, a woman named Malay. With a friendly smile on her face, she welcomed the pair and politely asked what kind of business brought them to the guild that day. Reda answered her by explaining that he wanted to move to this area and officially register himself at this specific branch. Malay acknowledged his desire to migrate to the town and gently gestured for them to follow her over to a designated desk area. Once they were at the desk, Malay handed Reda a document and instructed him to fill out the registration form. As Reda began writing down the required information, he quietly muttered to himself about the section asking for names. He wrote down his own name, Reda Dixon, but then paused and fell into deep thought for a brief moment. After thinking it over, he finished filling out the rest of the paperwork. Mina glanced down at the completed page and looked quite surprised to see that Reda had written her name down as Mina Dixon. Noticing her reaction, Reda quickly apologized for taking the liberty of writing his own surname for her without asking first, and he worriedly inquired if she disliked having his name. Mina gently shook her head to reassure him, stating that she did not dislike it at all and thanking him for what he did. Reda silently thought to himself that if he ever managed to find any of Mina's true blood relatives in this city, he could simply explain his reasoning for the name change to them at that time. Reda then informed Malay that he also possessed a special document, handing over the paper and explaining that it was a letter of introduction from the main guild headquarters back in the capital city. Malay took the paper to review it, but she immediately gasped in complete surprise as she read the contents. She corrected Reda, explaining that the document was actually an official letter of recommendation rather than a simple introduction, and she highlighted that it had been personally written by Syra. Mina anxiously asked if this was a bad development, but Malay quickly reassured her that a recommendation was far better than a standard introduction letter. Turning her attention back to Reda, Malay noted the claims written in the letter and asked if he was truly capable of using healing magic. Reda simply confirmed that he could, though he clarified that his abilities were limited to the basic heal spell. Malay pointed out that a specialized healer's guild existed in the town if he wished to join instead, but Reda explained that because he had worked as an adventurer for his entire career, he preferred to remain with the Adventurers Guild. Malay strongly emphasized that even if his magic was considered beginner level, simply possessing the rare ability to cast healing spells made him an incredibly valuable asset to the guild. She then curiously asked if he would be able to start accepting official work requests immediately the very next day. Reda reacted with great surprise at the sudden request, asking her to wait a moment because he and Mina had not even found a place to stay for the night yet. Malay smiled and provided an immediate solution, telling him about an exceptional inn that was directly affiliated with the guild and encouraging them to stay there. Leaning in closer to him, she happily revealed that the guild would fully cover all of his accommodation fees, and she added that he would also be granted free access to read any of the magical books owned by the guild's private collection. Reda felt a bit awkward, but thanked her deeply for the generous offers. Malay smiled brightly and confirmed that he would indeed be taking on jobs the next day. Reda agreed to work, though he humbly reminded her that his basic healing magic was really only good enough to replace a few standard potions. Malay bowed respectfully and assured him that his skill level was absolutely not a problem before thanking him for his cooperation. Reda brushed off the praise, stating it was nothing at all, and Malay handed him an official letter of introduction to present to the innkeeper before Reda thanked her one last time. Later that evening, Reda and Mina arrived at the designated lodging house. A large older man burst into a loud laugh upon seeing them, welcoming Reda warmly and calling him a young man. The man introduced himself as Riggs Doran, the proud owner of the establishment, which was called the Bearded Dwarf Inn. A young girl standing right beside him spoke up to wish them a good evening and introduced herself as Miran, with Riggs adding that both he and the girl were dwarves. Reda politely introduced himself by his full name, and Mina followed his lead by softly introducing herself to the hosts as well. Reda gently explained to Miran that Mina was a bit shy around new people, requesting that the young girl try her best to get along well with her. Miran enthusiastically and brightly agreed to the request. She stepped forward to hold Mina, noting that since Mina was going to be living in this town from now on, they should absolutely become great friends, and Mina happily agreed to get along with her too. Riggs smiled warmly at the sight of the two girls interacting, happily noting that his daughter already seemed to like Reda's daughter very much and looked incredibly pleased. Reda hesitated for a brief moment before clarifying that Mina was not actually his biological daughter. Riggs looked slightly surprised by the revelation, but he quickly dismissed any awkwardness by stating that when a person works as an adventurer, they often deal with many complicated life circumstances. He firmly added that he did not care about any of the private details, because the fact that Reda was actively taking care of the young girl was the only thing that truly mattered. Riggs then confirmed that their room was fully prepared for them, and Reda replied that the arrangements were perfectly fine, stating that he and Mina would be happily staying under his care from that moment onward. Riggs expressed the exact same sentiment, highlighting that since they were all living under the same roof, Reda and Mina should treat them just like members of their own family. Riggs called Mirren over and instructed her to guide the new guests up to their designated room, making sure to also show them where the toilet and the bathhouse were located. He affectionately ruffled Mirren's hair and added that she should sit down to eat a meal together with them after showing them around. Mirren replied that she already understood his instructions perfectly. Then, without any warning, she cheerfully grabbed Mina by her hand and excitedly surged forward, leading the young girl away as they headed off toward the rooms. Mina was slightly surprised when Mirren suddenly rushed off, but a short while later, the young dwarf girl returned carrying a heavy tray. She enthusiastically apologized for the wait as she served a delicious meal of pilaf, salad, and a hot soup packed with plenty of meat. Mirren placed the dishes carefully on the table and took a seat right next to Mina. Before starting their meal, the two girls happily announced together that it was time to eat, and they immediately began enjoying the food. Mina took a spoonful of the warm soup, tasted it, and eagerly praised how wonderful it tasted. Mirren chuckled proudly, stating that her father's cooking was always incredibly delicious. Mina recognized that the meat used in the dish was actually the special demon pig from Aurelia. Reda tasted the food as well and remarked that the cooking temperature was absolutely perfect, the aroma was highly fragrant, and the slightly salty flavor of the pilaf completely washed away all the exhaustion he had accumulated from their long travels. He praised Riggs for his exceptional culinary skills, admitting that whenever he thought of dwarves, he usually imagined blacksmiths working with metal. So he was highly impressed that Riggs could also prepare such magnificent food. Mirren chimed in to explain that her father used to forge swords in his younger days, but he chose to become a full-time cook right after she was born. Reda told Mirren that her father was truly a remarkable man, which caused Mirren to smile with immense pride as she agreed with his compliment. After finishing their dinner, Reda and Mina returned upstairs to their designated room. Reda commented on how sweet and friendly Mirren was, and Mina smiled warmly, confirming that she had already successfully become good friends with the young dwarf girl. Reda expressed his genuine happiness at hearing that news, noting that it was a wonderful development since they would be residing at the inn for a considerable amount of time. Suddenly, a gentle knock sounded at their door. Reda called out to answer it, and Mirren cheerfully pushed the door open to invite Mina to join her for a relaxing soak in the bathhouse together. Mina happily accepted, and the two girls headed off to the bathroom. While soaking, Mina gently helped wash Mirren's hair, and through their conversation, she learned that Mirren did not have a mother. Despite this, Mirren joyfully explained that running the daily operations of the inn alongside her father was an incredibly fun experience. She mentioned that they occasionally had to deal with strange or troublesome customers, at which point she excitedly splashed out of the water to proudly describe how her father would suddenly become full of energy to handle the situation. She told Mina that her father was actually quite cool when he protected the inn. Mina reflected on this and spoke about Reda, pausing briefly before confirming that he was also an exceptionally kind and wonderful person. Mirren grew highly excited at this and suggested that it would be absolutely fantastic if her father and Mina's father could also become great friends and share a bath together, just like the two of them were doing. Meanwhile, Reda happened to overhear their loud chatter from nearby and awkwardly muttered to himself that Mirren's idea would be a bit too much for him to handle. The following morning, Reda set out to work and successfully used his magic to heal an injured man's wrist. An experienced local adventurer named Tex watched the display in absolute amazement, noting that Reda had even managed to fully cure 3 other workers who had been severely wounded. Tex admitted that when he first heard about an adventurer bringing a young child along to a dangerous mission escorting lumberjacks, he had deeply wondered what kind of eccentric person Reda must be. Reda chuckled softly and apologized, explaining that since they had only arrived in the town the previous day, he simply could not bring himself to leave Mina all alone at the inn. Tex smiled warmly at this explanation and turned to Mina, telling the young lady that she certainly possessed a wonderful and caring father. Mina politely thanked him, addressing him as an older uncle. Tex jokingly pretended to cry at the title, loudly pleading with the young lady to at least call him a big brother instead, pointing out that he was only 40 years old. Hearing this, a man standing right behind him teased Tex by stating that 40 was already quite old, while another worker chimed in to say that Tex was actually closer to being a grandfather. Tex furiously turned on his companions, jokingly threatening to fight them if they wanted to challenge him. He then grabbed Reda and curiously asked Mina if she also viewed Reda as just an ordinary older uncle. Mina fell completely silent for a moment, thinking deeply about the question, before smiling brightly and clarifying that Reda was definitely not an uncle to her, but was simply Reda. This response made Reda chuckle with a bit of awkward gratitude as he thanked her for the sweet answer. A short while later, the entire group walked deeper into the forest and stood directly before a dense grove of incredibly tall, massive trees. Reda looked up at the immense foliage in confusion and questioned what they were supposed to do there, prompting Tex to casually state that he was leaving the task entirely up to him. Reda was completely bewildered by the sudden responsibility and demanded to know exactly what Tex was expecting him to accomplish. Tex scratched his head sheepishly and explained that he simply assumed a trained magic user would be able to handle a situation like this easily. Reda pointed toward the giant trees and asked if Tex was truly suggesting that he fell the massive timber all by himself, arguing that it was absolutely impossible for him to do so. However, Reda paused for a moment and fell in a deep thought, eventually changing his mind and suggesting that he might actually be able to give the task a try. Tex was thrilled by his compliance, stating that he expected nothing less from him and encouraging him to go right ahead if he had a working strategy in mind. Reda agreed to proceed, but firmly warned the entire group to make absolutely sure that no one stepped out in front of him. Reda closed his eyes and silently focused his mind, casting a spell to command the spirit of the wind to transform into a sharp blade and dance as widely and as low to the ground as possible. Instantly, a monstrously powerful gust of wind sliced cleanly through the forest, cutting the towering trees like blades of grass and sending a massive amount of timber crashing heavily to the forest floor all at once. Looking at the immense destruction, Reda sheepishly admitted to himself that the spell had turned out to be far too powerful for the task. The surrounding adventurers stood frozen in complete disbelief, their jaws dropping in pure shock at the display of raw power, while Mina quietly whispered to herself about how completely amazing Reda was. Tex shouted out in utter astonishment, playfully addressing Reda as a wild young man and pointing out that while he had indeed asked for assistance, he had definitely not expected Reda to destroy the entire area to that extreme degree. One of the nearby men asked in complete surprise if that devastating attack was truly supposed to be a standard wind blade spell, while another fighter questioned how a beginner-level magic spell could possibly cause that much damage. Tex jokingly slapped Reda hard across his chest, laughing as he pointed out that Reda's magical power was clearly operating at a level far beyond any ordinary wind blade in existence. A man standing next to Reda jokingly remarked that they would all end up losing their livelihoods if he kept destroying the forest so easily, while another worker loudly suggested that Reda should just change his career and become a professional lumberjack instead. Flushed with embarrassment, Reda quickly denied the idea, explaining that he had simply been feeling in exceptionally good shape lately. Tex mentioned that he had always heard a person's magical strength directly depended on the sheer volume of internal mana they possessed, and he curiously wondered out loud what the secret behind Reda's incredible power could possibly be, though he quickly decided to just drop the matter for the time being. Tex pointed out that their main issue now was figuring out what to do with all the freshly cut timber, as their standard transport wagon was far too small to hold everything at once. He noted that since they still had plenty of daylight left, they could probably transport the logs back to town one trip after another, estimating that there were about 30 large trees lying on the ground. Instead of doing extra manual labor, Reda focused his thoughts to cast a restraining spell in his mind, loudly calling out the activation words for a chain bind. Instantly, a massive number of magical chains materialized in the air and wrapped themselves tightly around the fallen trees to hold them securely together. Reda then gave Tex a knowing wink and casually revealed that he actually possessed a rare item box ability. He immediately activated the magical storage space, causing every single one of the massive, bound logs to be pulled cleanly inside until absolutely nothing was left on the forest floor. Once again, the surrounding workers stood frozen with their jaws dropped in complete and utter disbelief. Tex could only remark in astonishment that Reda truly seemed capable of doing absolutely anything, and the amazed men quickly swarmed around the powerful adventurer. Watching this unfold, Mina thought to herself about what a truly wonderful and good person Reda was. She recalled their very first meeting, remembering how she had initially felt very cautious and wary around him because she feared he might turn out to be a frightening or dangerous person. However, she had quickly learned that her fears were entirely wrong. Reda had taken complete responsibility for her at a time when she was totally lost and knew absolutely nothing about herself except for her own name. He continuously looked after her with the utmost gentleness and was easily the kindest individual she had ever met, proving to be completely different from any of the other professional healers she had encountered in her past. Breaking her train of thought, Tex loudly announced to the group that even though it was much earlier than they had originally planned, they were ready to return to town. He ordered the men to pack up the rest of their equipment, prepare the transport wagon, and get fully ready to head back home. As the men began to work, Mina could not help but remember how the selfish temple healers she had met before would only ever talk about the money they could extract from patients. In stark contrast, Reda only ever genuinely worried about the health and well-being of the people he was actively healing. Reda turned around to face Mina and gently informed her that he was going to go over and assist the workers with the packing for a brief moment, asking her to wait patiently for him until he finished. Mina gave him a warm smile and softly encouraged him to go right ahead and help them. Watching him walk away, Mina smiled brightly, feeling incredibly happy and grateful to have crossed paths with such a deeply compassionate man. She was well aware that Reda had been quietly asking around about her true origins, having already consulted both Malay at the guild and Riggs at the inn to see if they knew anything about her family. Mina looked up toward the clear sky, quietly noting the presence of the moon before softly whispering the word family to herself. A wave of sudden anxiety washed over her as she began to wonder what might happen if Reda ever discovered the truth about her background. She feared that he might stop smiling at her, grow to deeply hate her, or eventually abandon her to go off somewhere far away on his own, and the mere thought of losing him was something she absolutely did not want to happen. Her worrisome thoughts were interrupted when Reda called out her name, letting her know that it was finally time for them to start heading back to town. Mina answered him readily, confirming that they should go back together. As they fell into step, she made a silent promise to herself in her heart, knowing with absolute certainty that she wanted to stay right by Reda's side for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, back within the bustling streets of the town, an unidentified and mysterious individual was silently observing the area from a high, hidden vantage point. Reda and Mina walked along together, completely unaware that an unknown observer was tracking their every move from above. The hidden figure's dark eyes remained fixed on the pair, watching closely as Mina laughed happily while holding onto Reda's arm. Then, without making a single sound, the mysterious entity completely vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind.